According to the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis Reporting System, there are approximately 420,000 kids currently in foster care in the United States, averaging around 500,000 children annually. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics reports there were approximately 715,600 social workers employed in the United States. In 2020, Lance Hillsinger spent more than 34 years on the front lines in the trenches as a social worker. He's seen just about every type of case you would be exposed to as a social worker. He has experience at every level of the process, including what happens inside and outside of a courtroom during the foster care and adoption process. He's written 2 books on the subject matter in an effort to make the world a better place, and the foster care, adoption, and social work system seem less daunting in an attempt to attract more qualified candidates to offer deserving kids a place to call home. Hillsinger joined me this week to detail his experience in the field, why he wrote the 2 books, and his hopes for the future when it comes to the social work process. He's got a lot of valuable and insightful information to share, so without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn about your experience in the child welfare and social work system. Great to see you this afternoon, my friend, and thank you so very much for being here.
Again, you're quite welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, Lance, I know that you spent nearly more than 3 decades in the child welfare system, so I'm fascinated to begin our conversation by asking you, when you take a 360-degree view of the current system, what do you like, what do you don't like, and what do you think needs or could use improvement?
Well, that's kind of one of the reasons why I wrote my book, In Place of the Parent, Inside Child Protective Services, because I wanted to see the system improved. During the duration of writing the book, the system did improve in some ways and didn't improve in other ways. One of the things that makes the system work better is if there's enough foster homes. There is a critical shortage of foster homes, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because I hope by writing about the system, someone would say, oh, gee, maybe I could be a foster parent. That would be a way I could help, because that makes things a lot better. And most of child welfare, most of our cases are non-court cases. They don't involve kids with foster care. We deal with people informally, or we investigate something and it's not serious enough, or there's not enough evidence. But I dealt only with court cases all for except 1 year of my career. So that is my focus of kids that enter foster care, the juvenile court system. How that has improved, I think the system is a little bit better about taking cases to court and trying to work people, not using the court system as a last resort, because we try to work with people informally. We always have. We've gotten better at that. And I think that we realize that when you place kids with strangers in foster care or even with a relative, that's a traumatic event. Sometimes that is necessary, but you still have to recognize that disrupting a family, even a family that's kind of dysfunctional, might be harmful. You might do more harm, and though you don't want to do more harm than good. And so I think that the system is better now. The cases that come to court are more serious. And also that they have a process now of the code section, the laws that, at least in California, have improved. They have gotten situations where people who are really bad and have done something very horrible to a child or are convicted of serious crimes, and they're sitting in jail for some serious crime unrelated to their child, but they happened to father a child 10 years ago, and they still got 10 years on the sentence. That we don't have to, the system deals with that better now. So there's been improvements in the laws, and it's made that a little bit clearer on sometimes there are situations where the best interest of the child is not to offer the parents reunification services. Most of the times it is, that's the default option. But now, at least in California, there's provisions which, if the parent has done some awful things or has lost custody of a child before due to neglect, you don't necessarily have to offer, give them a second chance. And that's very helpful.
Yeah, and in your, since you've retired, as you mentioned, you wrote 2 books. And tell me, the process of writing the book, how did the process of writing a book go and the books go? And what's the message you hope people get out of reading the book and really taking action after they read them?
Well, the process of writing a book takes more time than you think it should. You have an idea and you write it down on paper, and then you edit it and you edit it, and then you're going to professionally edit it. And so getting your ideas into focus is the challenge. I think that it helped me because as a social worker, as opposed to someone writing other kind of books, I had to put cases into a coherent pattern so that both people who are an educated judge and people who maybe are semi-literate can understand what their report has to say and do it in a respectful manner, cover all the bases. That's one of the things I enjoyed, was taking a complicated case and making it straightforward in court. It may still be a complicated case, but at least trying to tell the story in a coherent fashion and what we should do. The takeaways is that I hope people understand the system better. I think Child Protective Services, because of the confidentiality of it, is misunderstood often by many people in the public. You have people, I think, who think the government is just snatching kids left and right, and other people think that social workers are just sitting at their desk doing nothing. There are people on both extremes there. And I want to tell the story that most of the time, people go about their job. Social workers, like most people, have pride in their work, and they want to do a good job. They want to do it right, and most of the time they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Labs, you had mentioned earlier the phrase "best interest of the child." In your line of work, I don't need to tell you that you hear that phrase a lot. So when it comes to that phrase and terminology, what do you think of when someone says, "What's the best interest of a child"?
Well, one of the things I point out in the book is that in the legal system, they use best interest of the child, singular. What is the best interest of the child? And a child has many best interests. A child has a best interest to have a loving mom, a loving dad, a good school, a safe neighborhood. So one of the points I think in the book I say is that we should say best interests, plural, of the child. Just as you say, the fishes of the sea, the many fishes of the sea is grammatically correct, and it connotes the richness of the ocean by using the plural. I think if you use the plural, best interest of the child, it better communicates all those things that the child needs. Not, a loving, safe home, but also good school, opportunities, good education, mental health services if necessary, medical services, all those things that children need, and all those are best interests. And I think the legal system defining it in the singular, I think that's an injustice in some ways. I think we have to look at it as the plural. What are the best interests of the child?
Absolutely. And, you know, in your line of work also, Lance, it's important to build relationships. And it's also important to take a listening ear into your line of work to really understand and to really be best of service. So when you look at building relationships and listening, what comes to mind in order to maximize the potential of any situation that you may be in as a social worker?
Well, one of the things that I was asked that in an interview question once, in essence, and I found that sometimes you have to take care of yourself. Be sure that you're in the right frame of mind. If I knew I was going to visit someone who I anticipated being a little difficult or hostile, I was made sure I had lunch. You know, I didn't want to deal with that person on an empty stomach. So part of it has to do with getting yourself in a good frame of mind. Sometimes I would park a couple of blocks up from the house, the apartment where I was going, and take 5 minutes to settle myself down, not be all anxious. Social workers, you know, we have deadlines like everybody else, and there's pressures. But I found that if I took a few moments, and I didn't do it every time, but I did it when I thought that I needed to. So you come in with a good attitude to people, and that you really want to be in that helping mode. One of the points I make in the book, though, is what are we doing to help the social worker stay in that helping mode? Or what are we doing to, the system is not helping a lot to keep the social workers in the helping mode. There's too much bureaucracy, too much paperwork, too much silly paperwork. You got government, you're going to have some paperwork. But one of the things I point out is that there's just the amount of paperwork has escalated during my career, and that is to a disservice because the social worker is spending too much time in front of a computer screen and not in front of a client.
Yeah, helping people is what it's all about, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it's a gratifying job. It's a frustrating job at times, but it is. I'm very pleased that that was my career, and I had a lot of gratification from working with all sorts of people. And you know, not every case had a happy ending, but enough did to make it very much worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Lance, you brought it up about really taking care of the mental health of social workers. So how do you think the system can better support social workers to better manage burnout and really get social workers reinvested in the work that they do?
Well, that's one of the things. I think you're right. Burnout is a very critical thing in child welfare. Civil service jobs traditionally have very low turnover. If you go to a clerk's office or some other government agent, government person with the county or the state, you know, the DMV has relatively low turnover. But we have a lot of turnover in child welfare because of a couple of factors. One is just the frustrations of the job. The clients you're trained in graduate school to deal with difficult people. That's why you went into it. So it's not so much the clients that give you burnout, it's the burnout of lack of foster homes. We also have some specialized foster homes that are geared for kids with unique needs. And I often felt like it was like we'd have these meetings about, well, is this child going to go or that child going to go? I always felt like it was a lifeboat. You know, we have 7 people in the boat, but only 5 life jackets. That gets to be frustrating. And the other thing what I want to hit very hard on is the demand of after hours. When I was a social worker in Los Angeles County, for calls that came in after business hours, there was a special unit. But in smaller counties like San Luis Obispo, social workers had to work after hours. So you would work 8:30 to 5, then be on call 5 to 8 a.m., 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., then be on work 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. again. And when you were on call, you made $2.75 an hour, which some people say, oh, you got paid for doing nothing. No, when my daughter was on call for delivering food, like for Uber Eats or one of those companies she was working for, she got $6 an hour for being on standby for takeout, and I got $2.75 an hour for taking out kids from bad situations. And that is very, very taxing if you have to work all day, get interrupted during the night to respond to a call, and then go work the whole day. And that is the very frustrating, especially for single parents. That was very, very challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine it. And in terms of moving the needle of progress forward, what do you think we've made sort of progress to be excited about when it comes to social work?
Well, I think that as I've talked already a little bit about the changes of the law, they're putting a little more common sense in the law. Let me just give you one perfect example, one simple, straightforward thing. Some kids in foster care, teens, will get into trouble with the law. And how do you handle a teen foster kid who's gotten trouble with the law? Should that child be dealt with through juvenile as a probation kid, or should that be child remain under child welfare? Now there's a new code in California, we call it 241.1, that sets out rules, that sets out a roadmap on how you make that decision. And there's some very common sense things that the social worker and the probation officer now have to write a joint report, describe the child's success in school or not success in school, other past history, their age, things like that. So the judge makes an informed decision on whether the child to be treated as a perpetrator, someone who's engaged in delinquent behavior, or come under and remain under child welfare. Occasionally it goes the other way too, where a child that's been under juvenile court and as a delinquent, and then their parents have some bad situation and they come the other way too. But most of the traffic is from child welfare to probation, though it does go the other way as well. But now we have a roadmap for those decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lance, I don't want this absorbing our conversation this afternoon. I'm curious to ask you about creating a blueprint for anyone that may want to consider becoming a foster parent and really getting into the adoption or the foster care system process. I'm wondering if you can lay out a blueprint to determine whether a person can decide whether fostering would be a good fit for them.
Well, I think that one of the things I point out in the book is that fewer and fewer people are in a financial situation that they feel like they can be foster parents. Traditionally, foster parents had their own homes, because fewer people can afford to buy their own homes, and people are renters. You can be a foster parent and be a renter. There's nothing against the regulations, but it's few people who are renters all say, well, I'd like to get my own home first before I care for somebody else's children or get my life. So financially, people are strapped a little bit harder. So I think if there's a higher barrier for people being foster parents, basically become because of financial situations. They do get financial reimbursement. Those rates have increased more than they used to. There was a substantial increase, and that helped foster parents. We were having a tremendous number of people dropping out simply because in California they weren't raising foster care rates. They finally realized that it made sense to do that. Now, as far as what qualities, people know if they like kids or not. People know that, and it's usually the moms, the foster moms, that drive this. Oh, gee, I'd really like to do this. If you're talking about an adoption situation, then the couple, they're usually more involved. That's a big decision, and that goes to it. There's a whole different process for adoption than foster parenting. Now, of course, your foster parent can become an adoptive parent, but a mindset, if you're just going to come with the mindset of adoption, that's a different route.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And In the preface of your second book, I believe that you wrote that neither the left or the right has a great monopoly on or ideas on how to best manage the foster care system. So I'm not asking you to get political. You can if you wish, but how big of a role do you think government, like from a federal level, has to play in sort of helping to streamline the process and making it a bit more palatable for everyone involved?
The federal government basically has a financial role now. If the child comes from a poor family, which is more often than not, the federal government pays the bulk of the foster care expenses. I think each county and each state has their own procedures, so I don't see a huge role for the federal government in dictating how local agencies should recruit foster parents. I don't see that as a role for them, unless if it's money in. One of the things that we see some ads on TV locally here, how to be a foster parent, especially during the pandemic that were done. And I don't know who paid for those ads. If the federal government were to kick in some money and help other agencies in other areas run ads and public service ads about becoming foster parent, that would certainly help. I think, and I just want to clarify, the process, at least in California, is that everybody has to go through the criminal record checks, the background checks, the home inspection, the first aid, that kind of thing. Whether you have to do all those things, whether you're a foster parent or an adoptive parent, there is a lot of similarities there. So that you have to do the checklist is virtually the same.
And Lonzo, I'm wondering your thoughts on the positive benefits for anyone who may be exploring this in terms of building lasting relationships and really building a bond of strength and unity within children to really give them a chance to succeed in life. So I guess my question is, how important is it to continually recruit foster parents? And I'm wondering if you can talk about the benefits from a social, emotional perspective for anyone who steps up to be a foster care parent.
Well, one of the things I use is that they should borrow a line from the Peace Corps. The Peace Corps' recruiting slogan is the hardest job you'll ever love. And so I think that's the foster parenting. The people, it's a hard job, but it's one that you love. There'll be a great gratification. And not only will the child, you have a memory of that child, whether you care for one child over and say it's not for you, or you do it for 20 years, 30 years, as some people have, you could look back and say, yes, this is something I did important with my life. It wasn't all, I did something that made a difference. And very often I can think of one of the first kids I placed with the foster mother locally in San Luis Obispo. I see her occasionally. She keeps in touch with the father. The father got custody, very unusual kind of situation. He got in, and so she's seen the kids. The kids went back to the dad. He was successful, and they've kept in touch, and it's very rewarding. That's one of those lifelong relationships, and she gets a lot of joy seeing the kids succeed in the father's home. And
yeah, absolutely. And Liza, I'm also curious to ask you if we lived in a utopian world, and I'm fully aware that we don't, but if we did, and you could wave a magic wand and sort of fix one aspect of the foster care system that really sort of gets under your skin on whether it's the way it's managed or perceived, what would you use that power and influence to sort of address?
Well, it may be a minor issue in the grand scheme of things, but one of the things I harp on quite a bit in my book is the Indian Child Welfare Act, ICWA. We call it the Indian Child Welfare Act, ICWA. That sounds great, but in practice has become really a burdensome. Give you some historical stuff. Back in the 50s, there were some children, hundreds of children were removed from homes of Native Americans, not because they were abused or maltreated, just because powers that be thought that kids needed a modern education. And that it disrupted the family life, disrupted their tribal connections, and it was an awful thing. So it took Congress a little while to get around to trying to redress that. But I think it was in 1976 or something that they had the Indian Child Welfare Act that said, okay, if a child comes in the foster care system, you have to give preference to placing the child with an Indian family, and you have to go through various steps, and that's fine. Okay. The regulations, the federal law hasn't changed at the federal level, but in practice, it has become burdensome that there's pages and pages of paperwork, and no matter how remote the child's Indian ancestry, you have to resolve that and see if the tribe wants. You have to send out notices, and so somebody might come into court, and the mom might say, I think I belong to the Sioux tribe, and the father says, I think there might be some Cherokee ancestry. We have to notify all the Sioux tribes. There's not just one. I don't remember how many Sioux there are, but there's 3 Cherokee tribes. So you have to notify all those tribes, wait for all of them to come back. You have to send these letters by certified mail by law. And 95 times out of 100, 98 times out of 100, they will come back, ICWA does not apply. So there's all this effort, all these hours devoted to fulfilling the requirements of ICWA that could be devoted to helping people. So every hour that the social worker devotes to ICWA is an hour not giving to something else.
For sure, it's all about making priorities and making sure that we put children at the center of everything we do, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Lance, until I get to that, I actually have one more for you. Lance, will share just a little bit about myself. So I was actually born with a disability. I was born with cerebral palsy. So just out of personal interest, I'm curious to know if placing children with disabilities is somewhat easier or harder in the work that you do.
I think it's more time intensive. Not that many kids enter with disabilities, but they often may have some medical problems just broadly. Very often it's babies that have some medical issue. The system has gotten much better at supporting the foster parents in that. If you're running to take your child to the doctor 4 times a month, that's time that you're not working, and so the system does permit the social worker with administrative approval to give foster parents more money if there's a child that has lots of appointments because of their medical situation. And one of the things that there's a paragraph in the court report that medical information, and very often kids, just to say one thing, dental care, foster care needs comes up very often in foster kids. Some foster parents are just going to say, we would like, ideally, if you have a child with some medical issues, you'd like maybe the foster parent to be a nurse or something, like to have some specialized knowledge there. It's not required. And very often, I think one of the things we have to remember is that our first preference is to place with family. And this is kind of why I have a beef with ICWA. Our preference is to place with family anyways. We don't need ICWA to say, let's place with families. And a lot of conservatives say, well, the legal standard under ICWA is higher to place with families than for everybody else. And that's like inequality there. And I see some argument there. But as far as disabilities, especially for rural counties, accessing services is a difficulty. I've had cases where I had one case where the child had to have some special ed care at UCLA, and just arranging that took hours. And the mother didn't drive, and we had to figure out her, but it worked out fine. UCLA happened to have a hotel, or yeah, they have like an apartment building, basically a hotel for parents of patients. So they put her up while he was in the hospital, and then I stayed at a hotel, and I drove her and the kid back after the procedures. But
Yeah,
all those are,
yeah, fabulous. And Lance, I'm wondering also if you had a chance to create sort of your ideal foster parent, and I'm wondering if there are any special characteristics or qualities that you look for when people express an interest, or you recruit foster parents as well.
well, they could kind of, I don't want to limit it to any one thing, but one group of people that make really excellent foster parents is early retirees, because usually those people have financial security. And so if the foster parent check doesn't come for whatever reason, it's not as big of a deal. And also they have gobs of time. So parenting kids is time intensive. Foster children, it's even more time intensive. And so balancing, but most people have to work. Balancing that work parent relationship is more you have to have somebody who's willing to do that. It can work. I've seen single moms as foster parents. I've never seen a single dad. But you just have to go with it with open eyes. And I think that that's one of the things that the system is doing better now, is that we're letting people come, educating them about the challenges and the rewards. We want them to run this very satisfying thing. But the time is the big thing there. And I would like to have people who have time, and I presume that they already have the attitude of caring. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something just very quickly that piqued my interest, Lance. You said that you don't really see single men or a single dad step up to be foster parents. So what do you think the key is to recruiting more men to get involved in this process?
I think that I don't really know. I don't know. I think that the foster fathers, some of them would be very much a co-parent with the foster mother. And some of them were definitely the secondary part. I had one foster parent with the two gay men. That gets to all sorts of other issues too. But I think, as far as, I don't think people are going to accept the idea too often of a foster dad solo. He's going to have challenges like every single parent. It might be a situation. Now, again, I want to repeat that most placements are with family. And I want to get outside of just foster care. I want to kind of talk about the system that men are not successful in caring for their kids. Because juvenile court, we remove from both the mom and the dad. So if the dad is out of the picture, why is he out of the picture? That's kind of why I talked about my second book, Build a Better Bridge, Social Policy for the 21st Century. What are we doing that helps men succeed? So that they can be good fathers to their kids. And so if there's a crisis in the mother's home, that the father is there. Now, I've had that happen. Where things gone downhill in the mom's home and dad's got custody, but it's much more the exception than the rule.
When you look at your legacy, how do you want your legacy to be remembered?
Well, I want people to know that I think that I left, retired with people knowing that I cared, that these books, I wanted to change the system. I want to make the world a little bit better place. I've advocated for changes that, if you change one policy that affects 10,000 people or 1 million people, that's far more effective than being a social worker. Over my career, maybe I helped a few thousand people over a 30-year career. That would be typical. But if you can change a policy and you help millions of people, that's even better. And so that's what I wanted, that I'm trying to do my best to get rid of ICWA, increase the ability of dads to be successful. There's a lot of ideas about the education system in my second book, and also how we can enhance, just outside of the child welfare system in general, how do we get men to be better parents and more involved as fathers? I had a good dad, and I like to think of myself as a good dad, but I know that there's a lot of men out there who aren't good dads. And why aren't they? What are we doing in society? What changes can we do within constitutional changes to help these guys step up to the plate?
Yeah, absolutely. And Lance, tell me if people want to buy the books or get in contact with you personally, what's the best way they can do that?
I have a website, lancehillsinger.net. Both books, I'm sorry, In Place to Parent is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can even get it at Walmart. Most of the major, Build a Better Bridge is available exclusively on Amazon.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Lance, I really want to thank you for the work that you've committed your professional life to. A chance to engage in conversation with you this afternoon about this important topic of child welfare, and your work in the space. And Tal, on my behalf, my friend, is most appreciated, and I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon.
Well, you're most welcome. Thank you for having me.